For our devotional today, I would like to turn your attention to Psalm 16:11, and we're going to be looking at that for just a couple minutes here today. Now, you might remember previously we looked at the first part of Psalm 16:11. Before I talk about that, let me just read the verse for you. Psalm 16:11. This is what David says. He says, "You reveal the path of life to me. In your presence is abundant joy. At your right hand are eternal pleasures." And previously we looked at this path of life that God reveals to us and this abundant joy that's found in God's presence. But today I want us to focus on the last part of the verse. At your right hand are eternal pleasures. That's something that's caught my attention lately. What David says, at your right hand are eternal pleasures. That's what he's saying there. It's another way of saying in God's presence. That's what he means by right hand. In God's presence are eternal pleasures. Eternal pleasures in God's presence. And God is the one that disposes them. God's the one that gives them. I think in part at least that means that there's some satisfying and enjoyable things to be had and to be found in God's presence. And I love the fact that David tells us here that God gives us eternal pleasures. Eternal being the key word there, eternal pleasures. It's not the temporary ones that we find in the world around us. It's not the temporary ones that the world around us can offer, because there's a lot of pleasures that we can have in this world. There's a lot of pleasures that we can have in life. There's a lot of enjoyable things around us, but maybe you found that the things around us usually, in this world, they usually don't satisfy us forever. They'll satisfy us for a period of time. They will be something that's pleasurable for a moment, maybe a long moment, maybe a brief moment. But there's all kinds of pleasures in the world today. But the problem is that we need to find more. We need to continue getting these pleasures and receiving them, because they don't last forever. At some point, they run out and they stop being pleasurable. So we need to do it again. We need to find another one. But what David says here is that there are eternal pleasures from God, in God's presence. These worldly pleasures satisfy us for a little bit, yes they can, but God's pleasures are eternal. They last forever. They don't fade. They don't go away. You don't need to find more of them, because they're eternal. And I love that David says in God's presence, from God, with God, in relationship with Him, in Him we find what we cannot get in the world. We cannot get these eternal pleasures in the world. We cannot get things that will eternally satisfy us in this world around us. But in God we can. David says in God you can get exactly that. In God alone you can get these eternal pleasures from Him. And I think the fact that they're in God's presence, God offers them, means that they can't be taken away. If it's God who gives it, then only God has the ability to take it away. And David doesn't say that. These eternal pleasures that we find in God isn't something that we can just lose. It's not something that will fade away. It's not something that someone can take from us, because it comes from God. And I don't know about you, but what David says here in this verse about these eternal pleasures found at the right hand of God, or found in God's presence, that makes me long to be in God's presence. That makes me long to be in His presence now, as much as I can in this life, to experience those pleasures, to experience the fullness of God as much as we can on this earth. That makes me long for His presence now. But what it also does is it makes me long to be in God's presence forever, in an ultimate sense. To be in the fullness of God's presence, where there's eternal pleasures. And that's something that God says we can look forward to this now, and we have something that we can look forward to eternally and ultimately. At your right hand are eternal pleasures. I pray and trust that today and this week you'll come to discover about these eternal pleasures that are found only in God's presence.